welcome to part two of the H-2B visa overview series that we just started with Abir Amin. If you did not listen to part one already, I would encourage you to go back and listen to part one so that when you listen to part two, it will make sense. It's the continuation of our discussion with Abir, and it went a little long, so we split it into two different parts. So the link for part one will be in the show notes or description below. So I encourage you to go back and listen to part one if you have not already. And for those of you that have already listened to part one, let's get into part two right now. We're picking up the conversation right where we left off. And follow up to that, in addition to the time involved, is it an expensive process to go through and to get workers this way, or
I
is it?
mean, it depends what you consider expensive for a company. And if a company is looking, okay, if I'm going to breach my contracts, and if this is a time that only have to make, a certain amount of revenue, and my sustainability for the company is dependent on workers,
Right.
um, then you have to kind of weigh, balance the act of what is more important. Yes, it is. It's not any cheap process. It's not anything very, it comes, there are a lot of steps involved, which comes with a price too. But at the end of the day, I have never experienced employers saying, "Oh my God, why did I go ahead and uh,
Right.
why did I go ahead and participate in this process? Why did I initiate this process?"
Right.
It's more the more complaint that I hear from employers like, "Oh, why didn't I start this sooner?" Or
Right.
"I wish I started this sooner so we wouldn't be cut off," or "I don't have to wait for the next time, like next year."
Right.
So yes, it is expensive, but it's definitely worthwhile when you think about the overall business growth,
Right.
and sustainability for
And I guess that's why it remains a very popular and competitive
absolutely,
program.
absolutely, absolutely,
Oh, okay.
absolutely.
Um, since it's so competitive, what would you say are some of the most important things that a company should do to have the best chance of being successful? Starting this process and seeing it through to the end and successfully
Right,
getting H-2B workers that
right.
they're looking for.
I really am a firm believer that the two main aspects, that companies should be always looking, keeping an eye out for. The first is time management. Um, these visas, they start, as I said before, there are two rounds, right? The two the time frames. Okay, for one round, you will get a visa from October to March, and the second is from April to September 30th. To be able um to be picked, in the H-2B visa to get selected in tier one or tier two, right? Assigned by the Department of Labor, you need to make sure that you are thinking ahead. So
Hmm.
you're not doing last minute. So time management is very important. That means providing your attorney with your payroll data, um, your taxes, your P&L statement, your profit and loss statements, so they can kind of assess what subcategory of the H-2B visa best suits your company and your needs,
Hmm.
right? That's one thing. So time management, always be aware of that. Um, and the second hindrance that I have seen, is that companies don't realize, um, how their record keeping, like how their financial record keeping plays a critical role in having an approved H-2B visa.
Okay.
Um, so like making sure that your payroll, you need to separate your full-time workers as opposed to your workers who are on 1099. All these things add up, and they facilitate in the argument that we need to have this many workers then to proceed forward with our contracts and to meet our contractual obligations.
Okay.
um, one more thing that I might add is like, don't get greedy. Like sometimes the companies say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I need 10 workers," because But when I'm looking at your financial data and I'm looking at the amount of contracts that you have, it's better to be less greedy, and it's your financial data says that you need only 5 or 6 workers, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes asking for more than you need, it results in an overall denial. So even those
Okay.
5 people that you could have used to increase or meet your business obligations, now you're getting zero because you were too greedy. So I think
Wow.
these
Okay.
are the three things that are very, very helpful for the companies to be prepared for. But
Yeah.
out of
Absolutely.
all those, time management is the most important. Most
Okay.
important. Yeah.
One last question. So let's say a company successfully obtains H-2B visa workers. How long can they stay in the country, and how long is this visa good for? Or is it time
Yeah.
limits? Or
The visa is given for the amount that you requested. Um, they will also look at not only your request, but if they feel um, that you have requested for more months than you actually need based on the data that the attorney has presented, based on your financials, then they will give you for 3 months instead of 6 months. But the maximum time that you can get for one period is of six months, right? Because you can
okay.
get either from October to March or from April to September 30th, right? That is the
Okay.
maximum time. However, they can be renewed, right? So if your company was chosen, and if the foreign national was also part of that, H-2B visa, and he got or she got the stamp on their passport, there were no other issues that prevented from her or him coming to the United States, and they have a visa. If they can go ahead and they can find other companies, or the same company says, I want to go ahead and get this person again, then the foreign national can come again for the
Okay.
company, but for the same amount of period, right? Not more than
Okay.
6 months. Maximum amount you can get on an H-2B visa is 10 months.
Okay.
But yes, it can be renewed and stuff, renewed so that it can meet the business expectations, and
Got it.
yeah,
I guess that makes sense since it is a temporary
it is a
work
temporary.
permit. So
Right,
yeah.
right,
Okay.
right.
So that's all the questions I have, at least for this part. Just kind of our overview. So I don't know if there's any additional things you want to add, or anything you think maybe we missed, or
Yeah, just one more thing that I want to add is when you stress temporary need is, um, employers need to understand that um, there are two other things that make or break a successful H-2B visa case, right? When you are saying is a temporary need, you always have to be careful. You are not trying to replace the American workers, right? Because you're saying the American workforce is there. I'm trying to supplement the American
Mhm.
workforce. It's not going to negatively impact American workforce, because that is what a number one priority. So
Yeah.
you cannot have the H-2B visas because you know you need these workers year round. That doesn't work like that, right? So you need to think about supplementing your traditional force, your workforce, right? That's one. And one more thing is, that I want to point out. It sounds very daunting, and yes, it is complex, but it is something that I have seen employers enjoy time after time, because it decreases their stress level.
Yeah.
It gives them a system to follow, and it's just it, it excites them to explore, more business opportunities, right?
Hmm.
So I know it might seem daunting, but if time management is maneuvered the way it's supposed to be maneuvered, um, it's really a pleasurable experience.
Yeah. I would imagine they end up with some pretty motivated employees too. I mean, what an
Absolutely,
opportunity. And
absolutely.
so, yeah, it's like a win-win for sure.
Exactly. The Department of Labor does allow the regulations, of the INA statute does allow overtime of these workers, right? So, as long as they're getting paid fairly, that's something that will, and as long as the guidelines drafted into the regulations are being observed, you can really make sure that, it's a win-win for both parties.
Yeah. Good. Very good. Well, that will about wrap it up for episode 1. So we really appreciate your time, Abir. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim. It was
And
a pleasure.
we will see you back for episode 2.
Sounds great. Take care.
All
Thank
right,
you.
you too.